They say there are no heroes left in this city, only wolves and sheep. But what happens when a terrified 7-year-old girl, hiding in a closet, tries to text her father for help and gets the number wrong? She didn't reach a cop. She didn't reach a neighbor. She reached Dominic Valenti, the most ruthless crime lord in Chicago. This isn't a fairy tale. It's a story about a text message that started a war. Today, we're diving into the incredible, twisted, true crime-style saga of how a wrong number saved a life and brought a criminal empire to its knees. You won't believe who the abuser turned out to be. Let's get into the story. October 14th, 8:42 p.m. Chicago, South Loop. The closet smelled of cedar chips and old raincoats. It was tight, dark, and the only safe place left in the world for 7-year-old Lily Evans. She pressed her knees against her chest, her small frame trembling so violently that her teeth chattered. She bit her lip to stop the sound. Outside the slatted wooden door, the apartment on West Polk Street sounded like a war zone. Crash! The sound of a heavy ceramic lamp shattering against the wall. "You think you can hide money from me, Clara?" The voice was slurred, heavy with whiskey and rage. It belonged to Richard, her stepfather. "I know you have a stash. Where is it?" "Richard, please." Her mother's voice was a wet, choked sob. "It's for rent. Please, stop." There was a thud, the sickening sound of flesh hitting drywall, followed by a cry of pain that made Lily squeeze her eyes shut. Tears leaked out, hot and fast. She had to do something. Her mom had told her, "If it ever gets bad, you text your daddy. You have his number saved." Lily's biological dad lived 3 states away, but he was big. He was strong. With shaking fingers, Lily pulled the cheap, pay-as-you-go smartphone from her pajama pocket. The screen glowed too bright in the darkness. She turned the brightness down, her thumb hovering over the contacts. She was crying so hard she couldn't see the names clearly. She tapped Create New Message. She thought she had memorized the number. Her mom made her recite it every night. 312-555-019. Wait, was it 0192 or 0198? Panic flared as another scream pierced the air. "Just type it. Just type it." She punched in the digits. 312-555-0198. Her thumbs flew across the keyboard, abandoning grammar, abandoning punctuation. Just pure, distilled terror. Text sent 8:45 p.m. "Daddy, please come help. He is beating Mama real bad. He has a bat. I am scared. Please hurry." She hit send. She stared at the screen, watching the little delivery bubble tick. 8:45 p.m. The Vesper Lounge, private VIP room, downtown Chicago. 5 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. The air smelled of Cuban tobacco, expensive leather, and fear. Dominic Valenti sat at the head of a mahogany table that cost more than most people's cars. He was 32, dressed in a charcoal 3-piece suit that fit his broad shoulders like armor. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of cold espresso. He was the don of the Valenti crime family, the unacknowledged king of the city's shipping unions. Currently, he was bored. The shipment was light, Dominic. The man across from him, a nervous Port Authority official named Gary, stammered. "I don't know what happened." Dominic didn't speak. He just tapped his fingers on the glass of scotch in front of him. Beside him stood Sal, his consigliere and oldest friend, a massive man with a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Gary," Dominic said, his voice low, a velvet rumble that vibrated in the chest. "You're stealing from me. That's boring. I hate boring." He reached for his phone, a sleek black secure line device, intending to check the time before ordering Sal to break Gary's fingers. The screen lit up. A message from an unknown number. Dominic frowned. Nobody had this number. This was his burn phone, the one used only for high-level hits and emergency extraction protocols. A text on this line usually meant the feds were kicking down the door. He unlocked it. He read the text. "Daddy, please come help. He is beating Mama real bad. He has a bat. I am scared. Please hurry." Dominic stared at the words. The grammar was childish. The fear was palpable. It radiated off the screen. "Boss?" Sal asked, noticing the shift in Dominic's posture. "Trouble?" Dominic didn't look up. Someone texted the wrong number. Spam? No, Dominic murmured. He reread the line. He has a bat. A memory flashed in Dominic's mind. Not of business, but of a time 20 years ago. A kitchen in Little Italy. His own father, drunk. His mother, crying on the floor. Dominic, 12 years old, too small to stop it. The helplessness of that moment had fueled every violent act he had committed since. He had built an empire so he would never be that helpless boy again. He looked at Gary, the sweating thief. Get out, Dominic said. Gary blinked. What? Get out before I kill you. You have 24 hours to replace the money. Gary didn't wait. He scrambled out of the room. Sal? Dominic stood up, buttoning his jacket. The boredom was gone. In its place was a cold, sharp focus. Trace this number. Now. Sal, used to Dominic's erratic brilliance, didn't argue. He pulled out a tablet, synced it to Dominic's phone, and ran a triangulation program. It's a burner, cheap carrier, pinging off a tower in the South Loop. I've got a localized radius, West Polk Street, apartment complex, Unit 4B, based on the signal strength and elevation. Get the car, Dominic said, checking the chamber of his Beretta M9. Dom, Sal warned, his voice low. We have a sit-down with the Russians in an hour. You can't just run off because of a wrong number. This could be a trap. A lure. Dominic looked at Sal. His eyes were hard. It's a kid, Sal, a little girl. She thinks she's texting her father. And nobody came for me, Dominic said softly. I'm going. Dominic typed a reply as he walked toward the elevator. Text sent, 8:48 p.m. I'm on my way. Hide. 8:55 p.m. West Polk Street. The black armored SUV mounted the curb, tires screeching. Dominic was out of the vehicle before it came to a complete stop. Keep the engine running, he barked at the driver. Sal was right behind him, struggling to keep up with Dominic's long, furious strides. Dom, you can't just burst in there. We don't know who these people are, Sal hissed, his hand hovering near the Glock under his jacket. Unit 4B, Dominic muttered, ignoring him. The apartment building was a run-down, brick pre-war structure. The lobby door had a broken lock. They bypassed the elevator, too slow, and took the stairs, taking them two at a time. On the fourth floor, the hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and marijuana. But as they approached 4B, they heard it. The screaming. You useless bitch! A man's voice roared. Dominic didn't knock. He didn't check for wires. He didn't assess the tactical situation. He stepped back and drove the heel of his Italian leather boot into the door right next to the lock. Wood splintered with a deafening crack. The door flew open, rebounding off the interior wall. The scene inside was frozen for a split second, like a tableau of domestic horror. The living room was trashed. A coffee table was overturned. In the center of the room, a woman, Clara, was curled on the floor, shielding her head with her arms. She was slender, with honey blonde hair matted with blood. Standing over her was a man. Richard. He was big, wearing a stained tank top, sweating profusely. In his hand, he held a wooden baseball bat, raised high, ready to bring it down on Clara's ribs. Richard froze, blinking in the sudden intrusion. He saw two men in expensive suits standing in his doorway. One of them looked like death personified. Who the hell are you? Richard slurred, lowering the bat slightly, confusion warring with aggression. Get out of my house! Dominic didn't speak. He walked into the room. His movement was fluid, terrifyingly calm. I said get out. Richard swung the bat toward Dominic, a clumsy, drunken arc. Dominic didn't even flinch. He stepped inside the swing, catching the bat with his left hand, stopping it dead. The sound of wood hitting Dominic's palm was a dull thud. Richard's eyes widened. He tried to pull the bat back, but Dominic's grip was iron. You like hitting women with this? Dominic asked. His voice was conversational, almost polite. Before Richard could answer, Dominic twisted the bat from his grip, spun it around, and swung. Crack. He took Richard's knees out. Richard screamed, a high-pitched sound that shattered the tension, and collapsed to the floor. Sal, Dominic said, tossing the bat onto the sofa. Check the closet. Find the girl. Dominic knelt down beside Clara. She flinched violently, scrambling backward on her hands and heels until her back hit the overturned table. Her blue eyes were wide, filled with a terror that pierced Dominic's chest. Her lip was split, and her cheek was already purpling. Don't, she whispered. Please, don't hurt Lily. Take the money. It's in the kitchen jar. Just take it. Dominic felt a strange sensation in his chest. Rage, yes, but something else. Protection. He held up his hands, showing his palms. I'm not here for the money, Clara, he said, guessing her name from what the man had yelled earlier. He took out a pristine white handkerchief from his breast pocket and offered it to her. Your daughter texted me. Clara stared at him, confusion clouding her pain. What? No, she doesn't know you. Who are you? Wrong number, Dominic said simply. Just then, the closet door creaked open. Sal, the giant hitman who usually broke legs for a living, was crouching down, looking gentler than Dominic had ever seen him. It's okay, Piccolina, Sal was saying softly. The bad man is sleeping. Lily emerged. She was tiny, wearing pink pajamas with cartoon cats on them. She looked at Richard groaning on the floor, then at her mother, and finally at Dominic. She ran. Not to her mother, but to Dominic. It surprised him. He braced himself, expecting her to attack him, but she slammed into his chest, burying her face in his suit jacket. She was sobbing. You came, she muffled into his expensive wool coat. You said you were on your way. Dominic stiffened. He didn't do hugs. He didn't do kids. But slowly, awkwardly, his hand came up and rested on the back of her head. I told you, Dominic said, his voice rough. I was on my way. We need to go, Sal said, standing up and scanning the hallway. Neighbors probably called 911. We can't be here when the cops show up, Dom. Not with him here. Dominic looked at Richard, who was clutching his shattered knees, cursing under his breath. You're dead, Richard wheezed, looking up at Dominic with hate-filled eyes. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my brother is? Dominic paused. This was the moment where he usually finished the job. But not in front of the kid. I don't care who you are, Dominic said coldly. But if you ever come near them again, I'll find out. And then I'll peel you apart. He scooped Lily up into his arms. She weighed nothing, and extended a hand to Clara. Can you walk? He asked Clara. Clara looked at her husband, then at this stranger who looked like a GQ model turned assassin. She looked at her daughter, safe in his arms. She made a choice. She took his hand. Yes. Good, we're leaving. Where? Clara asked, stumbling as she stood. Somewhere he can't find you, Dominic replied. As they moved to the door, Richard shouted one last thing, a detail that froze Sal in his tracks. My brother is Detective Miller. You hear me? Detective Frank Miller. He'll hunt you down. Dominic stopped. He shared a look with Sal. Frank Miller wasn't just a detective. He was the head of the Vice Squad. And he was on the payroll of the Russo family, Dominic's sworn enemies. This wasn't just a domestic dispute anymore. Dominic had just crippled the brother of his rival's pocket cop. Dom, Sal whispered urgently. This just got complicated. Dominic looked at Lily, whose tear-streaked face was pressed against his neck. Start the car, Sal, Dominic said. Let them come. October 14th, 9:45 p.m. The Valenti Penthouse, Gold Coast. The drive had been silent. A heavy, suffocating silence, broken only by the hum of the SUV's engine and the rhythmic breathing of Lily, who had fallen asleep the moment the adrenaline crashed, her small hand gripping the lapel of Dominic's suit jacket like a lifeline. Clara sat on the plush leather seat, staring out the tinted window at the blurring lights of Lakeshore Drive. Her body was vibrating, a physical aftershock of the violence she had just survived. She touched her cheek. It was tender, hot to the touch. She looked at the man holding her daughter. He was terrifyingly beautiful, sculpted from shadows and sharp angles. He hadn't spoken a word since they left the apartment. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw set, one hand resting protectively over Lily's back. "Where are you taking us?" Clara's voice was a rasp, barely audible. Dominic didn't look at her. "To the only place in this city Richard can't get in." The car turned into the underground garage of a glass and steel skyscraper that pierced the Chicago skyline. Security guards in dark suits nodded as they passed. This wasn't just an apartment building. It was a fortress. When the car stopped, Dominic shifted. He opened the door, carrying Lily with an ease that suggested he was used to carrying burdens. "Sal," Dominic commanded. "Call Dr. Eris. Tell him to meet us upstairs. And tell the staff to prepare the guest suite. The blue one." "On it," Sal said, already typing on his phone. They took a private elevator to the penthouse. When the doors slid open, Clara gasped. It was cavernous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the dark expanse of Lake Michigan. The floor was marble, the furniture modern and stark. It was beautiful, but it felt cold. Like a museum. Or a mausoleum. Dominic walked straight to a massive velvet sofa and gently laid Lily down. He took off his jacket, covering her with it, then turned to face Clara. Under the harsh lights of the foyer, he saw the extent of the damage. A split lip, a bruising jaw, red marks on her neck where hands had been. His eyes darkened, shifting from the color of espresso to something closer to black. "I should have killed him," he said, more to himself than to her. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. "He's a monster. But his brother, you heard him. Frank Miller is dangerous. You've put yourself in the middle of a war." Dominic walked over to a wet bar and poured a glass of water. He handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers. His skin was rough, calloused, a stark contrast to the expensive suit. "I am the war, Clara," he said calmly. Clara took a sip, the water soothing her parched throat. "Who are you, really? You're not a cop. You drive an armored car. You have men who follow your orders." She looked around the penthouse. "You're Mafia." It wasn't a question. Dominic leaned against the marble counter, crossing his arms. "My name is Dominic Valenti. And yes, I run the Valenti family." Clara's glass trembled, water sloshing over the rim. She had traded a domestic abuser for a crime lord. The panic flared in her chest. "Oh my God, I need to leave. I can't have Lily around this. If Richard finds out..." "If you leave," Dominic interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, "Richard will find you in an hour. Or his brother will. Detective Miller will track your phone, your cards, your face on CCTV. They will drag you back to that apartment, and next time, there won't be a wrong number text to save you." He stepped closer, invading her space, but not threateningly. He smelled of sandalwood and gun oil. "You are safe here. Nobody enters this building without my permission. Not the cops, not the feds, and certainly not Richard." Before Clara could argue, the elevator dinged. A short, balding man with a medical bag hurried in. "Dr. Eris." "Dominic." The doctor nodded, breathless. "Sal said it was urgent." "Check her," Dominic gestured to Clara. "And the girl. Document everything, every bruise, every scratch. I want photos for the file." "File?" Clara asked as the doctor led her to a chair. "Insurance," Dominic said, turning away to look out the window at the city below. "If Miller tries to come for you legally, we show them what his brother did." As Dr. Eris tended to Clara's face, applying cooling gel to the bruises and stitching the small cut on her lip, Dominic watched the reflection in the glass. He saw Clara wince, but she didn't cry. She was tough. Tougher than she looked. Lily stirred on the couch. She sat up, rubbing her eyes, disoriented. She saw the strange room, the doctor, and then she saw Dominic's broad back. "Mr. Hero!" she croaked. Dominic turned. The hard lines of his face softened imperceptibly. "Go back to sleep, kid." "I'm thirsty." Dominic sighed. He walked to the fridge, grabbed a bottle of expensive sparkling water, realized a 7-year-old probably wouldn't like that, and found a carton of orange juice. He poured a glass and brought it to her. He sat on the edge of the coffee table, watching her drink. "Did you hurt my daddy?" Lily asked, lowering the glass. Dominic stiffened. He looked at Clara, who had frozen while the doctor taped her ribs. He's not your daddy, Lily, Clara said softly, her voice breaking. Richard isn't your daddy. I know, Lily whispered. But he's the one who lives with us. She looked at Dominic with wide, serious eyes. Did you hurt him? I stopped him from hurting your mom, Dominic said carefully. That's what men are supposed to do. They protect. Lily thought about this. Are you going to be my new daddy? The room went silent. Sal, who had just walked back in, choked on a laugh, quickly turning it into a cough. Dominic looked like he'd been slapped. No, Dominic said quickly. I'm just a friend. A friend who has a very big house with a very good security system. Okay, Lily accepted this. She finished the juice and handed the glass back to the most feared man in Chicago. Your house is nice, but it smells lonely. Dominic took the glass. He looked at the little girl who had pierced his armor with a text message. Yeah, he muttered. It is. He stood up and turned to Sal. Get them settled in the guest suite. Put a guard on the door. Nobody in or out. Where are you going? Clara asked, standing up despite the doctor's protest. Dominic paused at the elevator. He adjusted his cuffs, the cold mask sliding back into place. To find out why a lowlife drunk like Richard has the vice squad in his pocket. There's something missing in this story, Clara, and I don't like missing pieces. October 15th, 7 a.m., the War Room. Dominic hadn't slept. He sat at the head of the conference table in his office, 3 floors below the penthouse. The War Room was soundproofed, swept for bugs daily, and lined with screens. Sal threw a manila folder onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of Dominic. It's worse than we thought, Dom. Dominic flipped the folder open. Photos of Richard. Bank statements. And surveillance shots of Richard meeting with men in tracksuits. Richard Evans, Sal began, pacing the room. Unemployed for 3 years. But look at his bank account. Deposits of $5,000, $10,000 every week. Then immediately withdrawn. He's a bag man, Dominic deduced, scanning the numbers. Moving money. Not just a bag man. He's a mule for the Russo family. Specifically for their narcotics division. But here's the kicker. He's been skimming. Dominic looked up. Stealing from the Russos? Yep. He's been shorting the drops for months. He owes them close to $100,000. That's why he was tearing the apartment apart last night. He wasn't just looking for Clara's rent money. He was looking for anything to pay off the debt before the Russos found out. Dominic closed the file. And Detective Miller? Miller is the Russos' cleanup guy. He protects the mules. He was probably on his way to collect the money when we showed up. When we took Richard out, we didn't just stop a domestic assault. We interrupted a Russo collection. Dominic rubbed his temples. This was a mess. By saving Clara, he had inadvertently stolen the Russos' money, since Richard couldn't pay, and assaulted their key protectee. There's more, Sal said, grabbing the remote. He turned on the wall-mounted TV. Local news. Channel 5. The screen flickered to life. A reporter stood in front of the apartment building on West Polk Street. The headline in bold red letters read, Mother and child abducted in violent home invasion. Police are searching for Clara Evans and her 7-year-old daughter Lily, who were taken from their home late last night, the reporter said gravely. Witnesses describe a black SUV fleeing the scene. The father, Richard Evans, was found brutally beaten and is currently in critical condition. Detective Frank Miller of the CPD has issued an urgent plea for information, calling the suspect armed and extremely dangerous. Dominic laughed. A cold, dry sound. They flipped the script. I saved them, and I'm the kidnapper. If Clara walks out of here, Sal said seriously, Miller will arrest her as an accomplice, or take her into protective custody, which means handing her over to the Russos to bleed the missing money out of her. She's the leverage now. Dominic stared at the screen. He saw the photo they were using of Clara, a smiling picture from happier times. She can't leave, Dominic said. Dom keeping them here, it's dangerous. The Russos will find out. This starts a war. The war started the minute that little girl texted me. Dominic stood up. Get the car ready. I need to pay a visit to Richard in the hospital before the Russos silence him. And Clara? I'll handle Clara. 8:30 a.m. The guest suite. Clara woke up in a bed that felt like a cloud. For a second, she forgot. Then the pain in her ribs flared, and the memory of the bat, the text, and the dark-eyed man rushed back. She bolted upright. "Lily?" "I'm eating pancakes," a voice chirped from the balcony. Clara grabbed the silk robe laid out for her and rushed to the glass doors. On the balcony, sitting at a wrought iron table, Lily was devouring a stack of pancakes covered in strawberries. Sitting opposite her, drinking a black coffee and reading a tablet, was Dominic. He had changed into a fresh suit. Navy blue this time, sharp as a knife blade. "Good morning," Dominic said, not looking up from the screen. "Mommy, Mr. Dom says I can have as much syrup as I want because he owns the syrup factory." Lily beamed. Dominic smirked slightly. "I own a logistics company that transports food products, Lily." "Close enough." Clara stepped out into the cool morning air. The view was breathtaking, but she felt trapped. "We saw the news," Clara said, her voice trembling. "They're saying you kidnapped us." Dominic gestured to the empty chair. "Sit down, Clara. I need to call the police. I need to tell them the truth." "The police are the ones who put out the story," Dominic said calmly. He tapped the tablet and slid it toward her. It showed the file Sal had compiled. "Richard owes the Russo crime family $100,000. He stole it. He was going to beat you until you gave him every cent you had, and when that wasn't enough, he was going to sell you out to them." Clara read the documents, her face paling. The bank transfers. The names. "Detective Miller works for them," Dominic continued. "If you leave here, Miller takes you. He hands you to the Russos. They will think you have the money Richard stole. They won't ask nicely." Clara dropped the tablet. She felt sick. "So I'm a prisoner?" "You're a guest," Dominic corrected. "Under my protection." "Why?" Clara looked at him, searching his face. "Why are you doing this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Dominic stood up. He walked to the railing of the balcony, looking down at the city streets far below. The wind ruffled his dark hair. "When I was 12, Dominic began, his voice low, "my father came home drunk. He had a debt to pay, too. He took it out on my mother. I called the police. I called the neighbors. Nobody came. I watched him break her arm." He turned back to Clara. His eyes were intense, burning with old fire. "I swore that if I ever got the power, I would be the one who answered the call. I don't care about the politics. I don't care about the Russos. Your daughter asked for help. She gets it." Clara stared at him. She saw the boy beneath the monster. "So what happens now?" she asked. Dominic buttoned his jacket. "Now we play house. As far as the world is concerned, you aren't kidnapped. You're with me. My girlfriend. Whatever. We change the narrative." "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "I want you to stay alive," Dominic said. "Sal is bringing you a phone. You're going to post on social media. You're going to say you left Richard voluntarily, that you're safe, that you're with a new man." "Richard will go crazy," Clara whispered. "Good," Dominic smiled, and it was a wolf's smile. "I want him crazy. I want him to make a mistake." He walked over to Lily, who was busy trying to cut a strawberry. He reached down and guided her hand, helping her slice it. "Be good for your mom, Lily. I have to go to work." "Will you come back?" Lily asked. "Always," Dominic promised. As he walked away, Clara felt a strange pull. Fear, yes, but also safety. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like she was standing behind a lion. 10 a.m. St. Jude's Hospital. Room 304. Richard lay in the hospital bed, his knees encased in heavy casts, his face swollen. He was hooked up to a morphine drip, floating in a haze of pain and rage. The door opened. Richard expected a nurse. Instead, Detective Frank Miller walked in. Miller was a thick-set man with a mustache that didn't hide his cruel mouth. He closed the blinds. "Frank," Richard croaked. "You gotta get her. That bastard Valenti, he took her." Miller didn't offer sympathy. He walked to the side of the bed and grabbed Richard's broken leg, squeezing hard. Richard screamed. Shut up, Miller hissed. The Russos are asking about their money, Richard. They don't care about your wife. They don't care about your legs. They want the $100,000. Clara has it, Richard lied, desperate. She took it. That's why Valenti grabbed her. He knows about the money. Miller released the leg. He stared at Richard with cold, reptile eyes. Is that so? Then we have a problem. Because Dominic Valenti doesn't need money. If he has her, he's keeping her. Miller pulled out his service weapon, checking the clip. Valenti declared war last night. He just doesn't know it yet. We're gonna hit him where it hurts. He wants to play the hero? Let's see how many people bleed for it. Miller turned to leave. Get well soon, Richard. The Russos want to have a chat with you when you get out. As the door closed, Richard stared at the ceiling. He grabbed his phone. He had one card left to play. He dialed a number. Not the police, not the Russos. Hello? A voice answered. Daily Tribune tip line. I have a story, Richard rasped, about Dominic Valenti and the little girl he kidnapped. The war was about to move from the streets to the headlines, and Dominic Valenti was about to find out that saving a life was much harder than taking one. October 18th, 6 p.m. The Valenti penthouse. 3 days had passed. 3 days of siege. Outside the high-rise, news vans circled like vultures. Richard's interview had gone viral. He had painted himself as a grieving, crippled father, and Dominic as a monster who had snatched his family. Inside the penthouse, however, the atmosphere was shifting. Dominic stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting his black bow tie. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Richard made in a year. Do we really have to do this? Clara's voice came from the doorway. Dominic turned. His breath hitched in his throat. A rare loss of composure. Clara was wearing a dress of midnight blue silk, chosen by Dominic's stylist. It draped over her frame, hiding the fading bruises on her ribs but accentuating the elegance she had forgotten she possessed. Her hair was swept up, exposing the long line of her neck. If we hide, Dominic said, walking toward her, they win. They control the narrative. Tonight is the mayor's charity gala. Every camera in the city will be there. We walk in together. We show them you aren't a prisoner. I'm terrified, Clara admitted, smoothing the silk. Richard will see this. Let him see, Dominic said. He reached out, his fingers grazing her cheek. Let him see what he lost. Let him see that you are under the protection of the Valenti family now. They weren't just playing a role anymore. Over the last 3 days, the lines had blurred. Dominic had taught Lily how to play chess. Clara had found Dominic asleep on the couch, guarding them, and covered him with a blanket. The fake relationship was becoming dangerously real. Where is Lily? Clara asked. Sal is staying here with her. The building is on lockdown. It's the safest place in Chicago. 8:30 p.m. The Grand Ballroom, the Drake Hotel. The moment they stepped out of the limousine, the flashbulbs blinded them. Reporters shouted questions. Ms. Evans, did he force you to come? Mr. Valenti, are you holding her against her? Will? Dominic didn't answer. He simply placed a possessive hand on the small of Clara's back and guided her through the sharks. He moved with a lethal grace that made the reporters part like the Red Sea. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of diamonds and champagne. The city's elite, judges, politicians, business tycoons stopped talking as they entered. Chin up, Dominic whispered in her ear. You own this room. They moved through the crowd. Dominic introduced her not as a victim, but as his partner. Clara played her part, but her heart hammered against her ribs. Then, the mood shifted. A man in a cheap suit pushed through the crowd, followed by 2 uniformed officers and Detective Frank Miller. Miller looked smug. He held a folded piece of paper. Dominic Valenti, Miller announced, his voice carrying over the music. Enjoying the party? Detective. Dominic nodded, sipping his scotch. You seem underdressed. Miller stepped forward, invading their personal space. I'm not here for the canapes. I'm here to serve an emergency custody order, granted by Judge Holloway an hour ago. He thrust the paper at Clara. The court has deemed this environment unsafe for a minor. Miller smirked. You are to surrender Lily Evans to Child Protective Services immediately, pending an investigation into her mother's mental stability and her association with known criminals. Clara went pale. You can't take her. If you don't hand her over, Miller said, his eyes gleaming, we arrest you for endangerment and kidnapping, and we raid your penthouse. It was a trap. If Dominic refused, the police would storm his home. If he agreed, Lily would go into the system, where Miller and the Russos could easily get to her. Dominic looked at the paper. Then he looked at Miller. You got a judge to sign this at 8 p.m. on a Friday? Dominic asked calmly. That must have cost you a lot, Miller. Or maybe the Russos called in a favor? Watch your mouth, Miller warned. You have 1 hour to produce the child. The room was silent. Everyone was watching. Clara looked at Dominic, panic rising. Dominic finished his drink. He set the glass down on a passing waiter's tray. Clara, he said, his voice loud enough for the nearby reporters to hear. Do we have the file? What? Dominic reached into his tuxedo jacket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a USB drive. You want to play the law, Miller? Dominic held up the drive. This contains the security footage from inside Clara's apartment. The camera Richard Evans didn't know was installed in the smoke detector. It was a lie. There was no camera. But Miller didn't know that. Miller blinked. The smugness faltered. If you execute that order, Dominic bluffed with terrifying confidence, I release the footage to every news station in this room. They'll see Richard beating a woman. They'll hear him bragging about his brother, the dirty cop. And they'll see you helping him cover it up. Dominic stepped closer to Miller, dropping his voice to a whisper. Walk away, Frank, or I burn your badge and your life right here. Miller stared at the USB drive. He looked at the reporters, who were edging closer, sensing blood. He looked at Dominic's eyes, the eyes of a killer who didn't blink. Miller snatched the court order back. This isn't over, Valenti, Miller hissed. He signaled his men. Let's go. As they retreated, Clara let out a breath she had been holding for minutes. Her legs went weak. Dominic caught her, his arm like a steel band around her waist. Did you really have a video? She whispered. No, Dominic grinned, the adrenaline making him look younger, wilder. But he couldn't take the risk. We bought some time. Let's go home. But as they walked out, Dominic's phone buzzed. It was Sal, Dominic answered. We're leaving now, Sal. Dom. Sal's voice was wet, gurgled. They came through the service elevator. Cleaning crew. It was a setup. Dominic's blood froze. Sal? Where is Lily? I tried, Sal coughed. They took her, Dom. The Russos took the girl. October 18th, 10 p.m. The streets of Chicago. Dominic drove. He drove like a man possessed. The armored SUV tore through red lights, doing 90 on the surface streets. Beside him, Clara was screaming, hitting the dashboard. You promised she was safe. I will get her back, Dominic said, his voice devoid of emotion. He had shut down. He was no longer the man in the tuxedo. He was the Don. He had Sal on speakerphone. Sal was bleeding out in the penthouse, waiting for the medic, but he had given them one piece of intel. They took her to the shipyard, Sal had gasped. The old grain silos. Richard was with them. He was in a wheelchair, laughing. Dominic's grip on the steering wheel tightened until the leather creaked. Richard, the man with the shattered knees, had dragged himself out of the hospital to torment a child. Is there a plan? Clara demanded, wiping tears from her face. Dominic, tell me there is a plan. Dominic pulled a hidden compartment under the dashboard open. He handed her a heavy, black pistol. Do you know how to use this? Clara looked at the gun. She thought of Richard. She thought of her daughter, terrified in the dark. Point and shoot? She asked, her voice hardening. Safety off. Squeeze, don't pull. Dominic looked at her. Stay in the car when we get there. If anyone comes near you who isn't me, kill them. 10:45 p.m. The grain silos. Calumet River. The industrial wasteland was dark, lit only by the orange glow of distant streetlights. The grain silos loomed like concrete giants. Dominic parked the car in the shadows. He stripped off his tuxedo jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and checked his Beretta. He grabbed a suppressor from the glove box and screwed it on. I'm coming with you, Clara said. Dominic looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It was the same fire he had. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "If things go wrong, run." They moved silently through the yard. They found 2 guards at the entrance to the main silo. Russo soldiers. Dominic didn't hesitate. Foot. 2 shots. 2 bodies dropped. He stepped over them without breaking stride. Inside the silo, the space was vast and echoing. In the center, under a hanging work light, sat Richard in a wheelchair. Beside him stood Detective Miller and 3 heavily armed Russo enforcers. And there, tied to a chair with duct tape over her mouth, was Lily. Her eyes were wide with terror. "Welcome to the party," Richard shouted, his voice echoing. He looked manic, high on painkillers and vengeance. "I told you I'd get her back." Dominic stepped into the light, shielding Clara with his body. "Let her go, Richard," Dominic said. "This is between us." "No!" Miller stepped forward, leveling his service weapon at Dominic. "This is about the $100,000 you cost us, and the humiliation at the gala. You think you can embarrass me and walk away?" "I think," Dominic said, his eyes scanning the room, calculating angles, "that you are a dead man walking, Frank." "Kill him," Miller ordered the enforcers. Time seemed to slow down. Dominic moved. He didn't dive for cover. He kicked a rusted oil drum toward the enforcers, creating a distraction. As they fired at the noise, Dominic returned fire. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots echoed like cannon fire in the silo. 1 enforcer went down. But there were too many of them. A bullet clipped Dominic's shoulder, spinning him around. He fell to one knee, groaning. "Dom!" Clara screamed. She scrambled out from behind the crate she was hiding behind. She wasn't running away. She was running toward Richard. Richard saw her coming. He fumbled for the gun in his lap. "You stupid bitch!" Clara raised the heavy pistol Dominic had given her. She didn't think about the years of abuse. She didn't think about the fear. She thought about Lily. She fired. The recoil nearly knocked her over. The bullet went wide, hitting the wheelchair wheel. But it made Richard flinch. It bought Dominic the second he needed. Dominic rolled, switched his aim, and fired a single shot at Miller. The bullet struck the detective in the chest. Miller looked down, surprised, before crumpling to the concrete. The remaining 2 enforcers turned their guns on Clara. "No!" Dominic roared. He rose from the ground, ignoring the blood soaking his white shirt. He fired with terrifying precision. Headshot. Chest shot. The enforcers dropped. Silence fell over the silo. Only Richard remained. He was frantically trying to wheel himself backward, jamming his gun, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Dominic walked over to him. He didn't run. He walked. He kicked the gun out of Richard's hand. "Please," Richard begged, looking up at the man who towered over him like the angel of death. "Please, Dom. I'm family. I'm her stepfather." Dominic looked at Clara. She had rushed to Lily, ripping the tape off her mouth, untying the ropes. Lily was sobbing, clinging to her mother. Dominic turned back to Richard. "You're not family," Dominic said coldly. "You're a wrong number." Dominic didn't shoot him. That would be too quick. He pistol-whipped Richard across the face, knocking him unconscious. "We leave him for the police," Dominic said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "With Miller's body and the drugs they have stashed here, Richard is going away for life." He turned to Clara and Lily. He dropped his gun and fell to his knees, the adrenaline finally fading, the pain in his shoulder taking over. "Did we win?" Lily asked, her voice small, trembling. Dominic looked at the 2 of them, the family he hadn't known he needed. "Yeah, kid." Dominic smiled through the pain. "We won." 1 month later, November 20th. Snow blanketed Chicago, silencing the city's chaotic hum under a layer of white. Inside the Valenti penthouse, the silence was different. It wasn't the cold, hollow quiet that had haunted the halls for years. It was warm. Dominic stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his arm no longer in a sling, watching the flakes fall. Sal had just left with the final update. Richard Evans had pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid the death penalty for Detective Miller's murder. He would die in prison. The Russo family, having lost their key detective and humiliated by Dominic's tactical dismantling of their operation, had retreated into the shadows. The war was over. Clara walked into the room. She looked healthier now, the bruises long faded, her eyes bright and clear. But her expression was hesitant. She was holding a packed suitcase. "The lawyer called," she said softly. "It's official. Richard is gone. We're safe." Dominic turned, his face unreadable. "And the bag?" "The deal was until the threat was gone," Clara said, her grip tightening on the handle. "You don't have to protect us anymore, Dominic. I've found a small apartment in Lincoln Park. Lily can start school on Monday." She waited for him to nod, to open the door, to go back to his life as the solitary king of Chicago. Instead, Dominic walked over and placed his hand over hers on the suitcase handle. "You think I burned down half the city just to let you walk out the door?" he asked, his voice low and rough. "I don't want to be an obligation," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "You aren't," Dominic replied. He stepped closer, invading her space, his presence overwhelming and comforting all at once. Before that text message, this place was a fortress. Now it's a home. "I don't know how to live in the quiet anymore, Clara. Don't make me go back to it." Clara looked up at him, searching for the truth. She found it in his dark eyes. Not the ruthlessness of a mob boss, but the vulnerability of a man who had finally found something worth losing sleep over. "Stay," he commanded, though it sounded like a plea. "Okay," she breathed, letting go of the suitcase. He kissed her then. It wasn't the performance they had put on for the press. It was slow, possessive, and real. A seal on a new contract that had nothing to do with business. Ew! They broke apart, laughing. Lily stood in the hallway, holding her tablet and wearing fuzzy socks that slid on the marble floor. "Are you guys gonna get married now?" she asked skeptically. "We're negotiating." Dominic smirked, crouching down to her level. "Well, if you're keeping us," Lily said, her eyes gleaming with mischief as she tapped on her screen. "I have demands." Dominic's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, a smile touching his lips. Text received 9 p.m. "Can we get a puppy? A big one, please?" Dominic looked at the little girl who had changed his destiny with a wrong number. He typed a reply, his thumb hovering over the send button for a heartbeat. Text sent 9:01 p.m. "I'm on my way." And that is the story of how a single wrong digit saved 2 lives and brought down a corrupt empire. From a closet in the South Loop to the top of the Chicago underworld, it proves that sometimes fate sends a text message. What do you think? Did Dominic go too far, or was it exactly what Richard deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want more twisted, romantic, true crime-style dramas, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next episode. We have a courtroom thriller coming up next week that you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching. And remember, check the number before you hit send. You never know who's listening.